Okay, respected Dean of the Institute, the Director of the Institute, the organizers of the conference, ladies and gentlemen. Today, it is my privilege to be here to address you on this conference, to share my thoughts about the dimensions of business model. In the last 5 years, if you have seen, the business has undergone tremendous changes. A lot of evolutions and transformations have happened as part of some of the policy events that has happened, as well as some of the biological developments that has taken across the globe. So in the last 5 years, once we faced the policy change and which resulted in demonetization, we came across a scene where people became so conversant with digital transactions. Subsequently, when the pandemic erupted, we came across the business itself escalating to a level where the total commerce is on a digital platform. So which means that over a period of time, the business has evolved to become much more flexible. So flexibility is one of the key features that we have observed in the last 5 years as a business phenomenon. Then we also observed that as these phenomena are happening, as the business environment became more and more volatile, what we have observed is the business have learned to adjust to these changes, rise up to the needs at a spur of a moment. So which means along with the flexibility, business also has acquired the ability to be quick. While being flexible and while being quick, business has garnered its ability to provide the customers with highly individualized solution. The times have come when we are no more going to take a product as it is. We will take only those features what we look for as part of the product or the service we take, which means that the products and service are going to be so tailored. Typically, the term that we will use is customization, product individualization is what we are going to see. And already it has reached to some level of maturity. So 3 factors I have underlined as part of the violent business changes that has happened in the last 5 years. They were the flexibility, they are the quickness elements, they are also part of the product individualization aspect of the business. Now, while a business has demonstrated these 3 factors, let us not be under the impression that business has been going smoothly. Business had its own share of challenges to face. Couple of the kind of challenges that has come up during this time period in a more profound way, in a more prominent way are the kind of technology challenges the business has been facing. The number of technology changes has increased. The technology complexity has changed. So which means the competency of the business professionals had to forcefully upgrade themselves to accommodate, to adopt, to adapt the kind of technology changes that we were, to a large extent, I would say, unexpectedly, we tried to see in the last 5 years. In the same time, customer behavior also has changed a lot. Now, if we see the customer behavior before 5 years, how it was in the last 5 years, it may not be so different. But then over the last 2 decades, if you see, there's a marked difference in the customer behavior. Now, in the last 5 years, if you see, the customer behavior has turned into more of a customer experience-based behavior. Now, if the experience of the customer is not good, then the customer tried to vehemently react to the service or the product that, that they are being provided. So customer experience became the fundamental metric that would hereafter describe the kind of satisfaction a business provides to the customer. Now, alongside with it, customer also had undergone a little bit of change. I don't want to say that it is a positive change or a negative change, but then it is quite an observation that we found the customers are more becoming demanding. At the same time, while they are demanding, the requirements are very vague. There is a lot of clarity issues in what they are looking for, but what's happening here is the requirements, what they have in their mind, they are there in the product. But only thing is that with the time, the kind of services or the features that they have seen in the product, slowly they are getting used to it, and they are taking it as a usual business as usual kind of a routine. So they want something better, but then there is a level of inability that we see in describing what precisely they are looking for. So when it comes to requirements definition, there is a lot of haziness that we have started observing. But at the same time, the pressure on the product and the service provider has considerably increased, because we have to anticipate, we have to perceive what they have in their mind, and accordingly we have to develop the product or the service. So given these changing business conditions, the changing challenges in the business environment, how many of you think that conducting business is easy? Conducting business has never been easy. Now it is no more easy. So the complexity of business is just increasing. So considering these conditions, two major aspects that determines the way the business is being done is concluded to be the business models that we employ and the kind of innovations that we drive on the business models. So those are the two important factors that will determine the success of a business in the current times. So at this juncture, actually, the theme of the discussion is getting into two streams. One is the business model per se, and the parallel stream that will drive is the technological innovations that we are going to have as part of the current world changes and the way the commerce is transforming itself. So at the beginning, I will take one stream of business model, then subsequently we move to the other stream of technological innovation, and we will try to bind it towards the end. So to begin with, we have to start with a business model. So the success, as I said, the success of a business in the current times is going to be determined by the business model a company is utilizing. So business model is going to be a core competency. It is an IPR of the business. So it is that sensitive. So business model determining the success of a business makes it so sensitive to the business itself. Therefore, it is high time that there has to be considerable amount of discussion around the evolutions that happen in the business model, how to drive changes in the business model, how to drive innovations in the business model. So that's why I thought we will discuss business model first. Now, getting into the business model, it is essential that we need to have an understanding about what is the role of a business model. To discuss about the role of business model, I would try to segregate its roles into two dimensions. The first dimension is the structural dimension, and second dimension is the functional dimension of the business model. So what exactly could be the structural dimension of the business model? Now, before I get into the classical examination of the particular aspect, let us take the case of a smartphone. So if a smartphone has to reach your hands, then there has to be so many players, so many, I would say, so many actors to be involved in it. So many components has to be involved in it. So what are the typical kinds of components that come together to make sure that a phone is smart? So nowadays, if any phone doesn't sell unless the phone is smart enough. So what makes a phone smart? So if a phone has to reach your hands, a phone has to have a hardware, a phone has to have a platform owner, a phone has to have, or a phone has to have so many apps to be planted onto it to make it smart. So it means too many actors are involved in it, too many components are involved in it. Therefore, there has to be a structural mechanism to integrate these components. So the hardware component, the platform component, the app component, all these components have to be integrated, and many of these components will have sub-components inside it. So indirectly, I'm trying to say that the sub-components has to be interacting very well, and the components has to seamlessly integrate. So interaction of the sub-components and integration of the components in totality makes a business model. So that the phone, once it is created, it has to go all the way up to a component that makes sure that the phone reaches our hands. So all those elements in totality makes a business model. So such a business model representation is the structural role a business model plays. In other words, the interaction of the subcomponents and integration of the components together makes a business model. Now, when such a business model in structural form, once it emerges, it has certain functional roles to play. Now, what are the functional roles such a business model is envisaged to play? Now, a business model has its primary task in sensing the signals from the market. Any product, if it has to survive in the market, it should have the ability to sense the signals from the market. The product has to evolve alongside with the expectations of the market. Otherwise, the product is no longer going to survive in that market. So the ability of the business model to sense the business signals from the market is one of the key characteristics the business model has to play. So I would call it as sensing the signal. Once the signals are sensed, it is not possible that every signal that comes from the market you will be able to work on. So the signals has to be sieved out to find out what practically is possible to be translated into a product. So once you sense the signals, then you have to seize the opportunity in the market to convert it into a business success. So that seizing the signals, sensing the signals, seizing the opportunity is also part of the business model's functionality. Once you seize the signal, then what comes next is designing the product. You need to have a product that actually meets the expectations of the market. So seizing the signal, sensing the signal, seizing the opportunity, and designing the product are three functionalities a business model is supposed to perform. So from a business model angle, if you look at its role, if we clearly lay out, it has a structural purpose it has to perform. It has a functionality it has to perform. Its structural role is all around integration of the components and its subcomponents, while its functional role includes sensing the signal, seizing the opportunity, and designing the product, making sure that it reaches the market. So while this being the role, how does it look like? How does this business model will look like? Business model is an architectural diagram. with all the structural integrity an architect will ensure in an architectural diagram, a business professional has to ensure that there is proper structural integrity in an architectural diagram for business model also exist. So there has to be parameters that needs to be laid out to make sure that the business model architecture is perfectly balanced, stabilized, and all the loose ends are tied up well. In other words, all the loopholes through which a competitor can sneak in are plugged properly. Now, while architecture is all about the structural dimension of the business model, then there is a logical aspect to the business model. A logical aspect to the business model, when I describe, I would say that a business model actually ties the strategy with the value business gets. So business model is something that connects strategy of the business with the value it is going to generate. So what is that element lying in between the strategy and the value? They are the business processes. So there could be a plethora of business processes existing, and these business processes are continuously interacting with one another, communicating with one another. There are no loose ends between the business processes. There are no independently lying business processes, are all interconnected. So when all these business processes are lying interconnected, making sure that there is a proper logic that connects the strategy with the value, rather the benefit business is going to derive, is properly achieved because of these business processes, is what a business model has to ascertain. So that part is also making things clear, and then we move to the next level. Why do we need a business model? If there is no business model, what is that we are going to face? So once we understood the role of the business model, once we understood what is this business model, it is very easy to figure out what exactly is that we are losing out if we don't have a business model. So a business model will actually help us to survive in the market. Rather, it helps us to sustain in the market. In the current context, I rather would prefer to say that it helps you to sustain in the market. It helps you to survive the competition. And finally, it will help you to overcome the technological developments that are happening in the market. Once you have the business model very clearly laid out, then you know where are the new technologies appearing. Where are your weaknesses in the current components and in what state it is? So accordingly, you will be able to prescribe changes in the existing components, prescribe incorporation of better technologies, such that without altering the overall architecture, without destabilizing the overall architecture, you will be able to plug and play with so many components and making sure that your ultimate objective is achieved without creating any imbalances in the business architecture. So that is, while that being the state, what exactly will determine success of a business model? So we know what is the role of business model. We know what is the business model. We know what exactly are the purposes a business model is supposed to play. If that is the case, what are the primary drivers which will determine the success of a business model? So that is yet another critical aspect which we need to look at. So I would say that there are two dimensions again for determining the success of a business model. First, I would put it as the context. When I say context, what it means is it is about the environment that is sustaining the business. It is the womb within which the business ecosystem is surviving. It is essential that we need to have a fair understanding about the business environment. That is a summary of the story. So the changes in the business environment will definitely have an impact on the business model. We have to make sure that we need to sense the changes in the business environment as quickly as possible so that the models can be remodeled, reconfigured, such that at any point in time, our business model is appropriate to work in that particular business environment. The other side of the C, the two C's I wanted to mention, one is context and the other C is the core competency. So a business model, the success of a business model is determined by the context as well as by the core competency. Why core competency becomes important? What all things are part of core competency? Core competency involves the competency of the people, capability of the process, and capability of the technology. All the three factors together forms the core competency, which becomes a determinant of a business model. Now, if you look at the capability of people, that's a very important aspect. When we say that capability of people, it is not only about the skill of the individual, it is also about the attitude of the people. It is also about aptitude of the people, which makes them a lot more flexible, adaptable to the changes which are inevitable in the market nowadays. So people factor is done, the processes. No, we cannot have straitjacketed processes anymore. So processes, we need to understand that processes written today are going to be invalid the next moment. If the environment demands it, we have to change it. So processes have to be highly adaptable to the changes in the environment. Processes by its nature has to be dynamic in nature. So such processes, if it has to be implemented, then there has to be a technology support to associate with it. So the technology that we use today has to be contemporary in nature. It has to be the in thing. It has to be the cutting edge. So you always have all the three factors laid out well will determine your core competency. So context plus core competency will determine the success of your business model. Now, you know the role a business model has to play. You know what is a business model. You know what are the determinants of the business model. But then at the end of the day, how is this business model created? How can we discover a business model? It's a natural question that can come up in a discussion, right? So a simple answer that I can give you is, just to make sure that the discussion moves smooth, a simple answer that I can give you is identify where you want to play. What is the target market segment you have in mind? That is the first step. Now, second step is you should know in what problem space you need to work. In which problem space you want to work. So once you know the target segment, next is you need to know what problem you want to work on. The third step is you need to identify what are the existing solutions in that particular target segment, in that particular problem space. Once you know exactly what are the kinds of solutions already in existence, then what you should do is you must be able to pick up what are the gaps in the current solution. So there is a proper gap analysis on the products that are currently available has to be performed so that you know clearly what are the pitfalls of the current solutions. Now, once you know the gaps, you top it up with additional premium features, take it to a digital platform, and that becomes your business model. It is very easy to say. When we talk about business model, very easy to explain it, but then we have heard only about the success stories of business models, but then there are sad failure stories as well. When we know Airbnb, when we talk about Apple streaming, when we talk about so many other products, we have only focused ourselves on the success side of the business model. But there are stories of Kingfisher, there are stories of Nokia, there are stories of HMT watches, there are stories of nano cars, which are available all around us. So, which means that it is very easy to say business model and how to create it, but then success is not there everywhere. There are failure stories, and there are more failure stories than success stories. So it has its own element of guts, grit, all associated to it. Now, at this juncture, I will take you through the other stream. I mentioned at the beginning that when the challenges are there, when the changes are there in the business is determined by two factors. One is the business model, and the other is the technology transformations that happen on the business model. So now let us take the technological transformations that happen on the business model. So in a technology transformation, we call it as technology disruptions. So technology transformations, why do we perform it? It is for the purpose of innovation. And what does it innovation means? Innovation means we need a radical change in the business performance. So when this radical change in business performance is mediated by a technological change, that part is what we call as disruptive innovation. Once we have the disruptive innovations performed, now you have certain characteristics you can look forward to in a process, in a business model that has undergone technology-induced disruptive innovation. Now, what is that perspective or characteristics that you can find obviously in a technology-induced disruption is an optimized business process. So what does an optimized business process will provide you? An optimized business process will obviously provide you certain economic advantages such as you will have less downtime, lesser repair time, which means that your productivity will go up and naturally profitability can go up. That is the logical conclusion. There is an environmental impact to it. When I say defects are less, it also means that your scrap level is coming down. So, which means the hazardous waste is also coming down. Then there is a social benefit aspects attached to it. So social aspects means those work areas which actually has an impact on the safety and security of the workers, that can be automated, that can be robotized. Those things which can be done by many other ego issues are there, motivational issues are there. Those all things can be changed by the disruptive innovations that can happen. So when this disruptive innovation happens on the business model, we call it as a digital business model innovation or digital disruptive business model innovation. At this juncture, what are the possible research areas that we can look at? We can look at the servitization contracts. That is one area where large scale research could be possible. There is also possibility of looking at how data monetization can happen. And there is also a possibility where there are multiple digital service providers uniting on a single platform, how the contracting can happen. All those areas are worth exploring as part of doctoral researchers in the days to come. At this juncture, let me wind up the session. Before that, let me conclude by collecting the thoughts that I have laid out. We discussed about business models, its role, its characteristics. We talked about disruptions in innovation. We talked about how binding disruptive innovation can be with the business models to make sure that the business model is relevant and up to date. So with that, let me thank all the cooperative audience that I had in this meet. Thanking all the organizers for calling me back to the session, handing over the